Do you want to live more sustainably but aren't sure where to start or how it fits in with your everyday living? The ReNewy Living Podcast simplifies sustainability so you can feel confident to take small, meaningful actions that fit into your lifestyle. Based on the lands of the Awabakal and Worimi people in Newcastle, Australia, you'll learn how to live lighter on our planet through practical ideas, stories from like-minded people, and examples of businesses doing great things. With an open heart and mind, join me, Marty Lee, as we explore how to consume less, build stronger community connections, and thrive in your neighbourhood, wherever you call home. Welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast. Hello, I'm Marty Lee and welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast. Are you amazed at how much food waste you have at your place? Imagine the volume of waste for a food-based business. Unlike the availability of recycling and general rubbish collections, commercial kitchens face big challenges with their food waste. David Sivyer is the founder of Feedback Organic, an initiative focused on reducing food waste from commercial kitchens. Starting here in Newcastle as a grassroots initiative, Feedback now works with businesses to reduce their food waste from going to landfill. He saw the need for connecting businesses and communities with a sustainable, environmentally friendly food system.
My name is David Sivyer and I founded in 2013 a delightful organisation called Feedback Organic. And what it's all around and what it's merged into now is creating community-inclusive circular food systems. We're all about creating and advocating for urban farms and cities that divert food waste from going to landfill. And an important part of that is we run a food waste collection that's around cities, and any organisation or any individual that wants to do something sustainable about their food waste. And we at the same time then process that through a number of different partnerships. We used to do it ourselves, but now we partner with a lot of different organisations to do that. Then importantly, grow food from that processed food waste, which is now in compost form, and I guess innovating and trying to think about how a big part of society has become a little bit disconnected from our cities and our food systems. And I think we're trying to foster that as best as possible.
When you started Feedback Organic back in 2013, you wanted to connect food growing with the people and the farms. What made you start doing that?
Yeah, I'm a fifth generation farmer, so I have a bit of a background in farming, and I think just my journey itself as I experienced as testing the waters or testing the ground ideas, I guess, through urban farming. I think we started farming or started composting the food waste up at our family farm for many years, and then just serendipitously ended up moving into Newcastle and thought about how can we actually operate farms in cities and then processing the food waste in cities as well. And so, yeah, just organically, many puns throughout all of these terms as well. Organically, there was a natural progression of let's involve everyone into that process of that whole closed loop of food waste into food. And I think, it's one of the most pivotal parts about why we exist. I think, there's not really a lot of established platforms, physical platforms within cities or just within our earth that actually enable us to connect well with our food system. And I think our approach is really just about a great cross-section of society to try and see how we can all work together to develop new systems and innovate a little bit.
What did it look like when you first started connecting farmers and community together, like when you first started, to compare to what happens now?
I think it was a lot more hands-on, and that was fantastic. And our first urban farm was actually as part of the Hunter Research Foundation in Maryville in Newcastle. A fantastic opportunity just to kick off an actual physical spot to farm in a city. And that has progressed in so many different iterations about what is the best way forward. How can we process food waste in cities? And also how can we grow food? How can we engage people? And we've gone through a number of different locations, a number of different partnerships where we've been working in collaboration through with other farmers as well in cities. And more recently, that was one in Somersby on the Central Coast with ARC and Totec, an amazing organisation. We've actually merged into the non-profit world now, which is quite a milestone to get it underway. And with that, we've actually secured DGR status, which is a deductible gift recipient status, which allows, as a non-profit, quite a significant more amount of donations to get your ideas and initiatives and projects off the ground. And I say that because our next focus is really thinking about how do we do this better. When we talk about it in the sense of feedback organic, it's really the stakeholders that make up a city. So we really try to incorporate a great cross-section of every stakeholder within the city, the best kind of blend we can. And by that, I mean, we're trying to focus and collaborate with food insecure organisations, to universities and research institutions, to local councils and regulatory organisations like the EPA, and that's the Environment Protection Authority, to kind of large corporates, and definitely small to medium hospitality businesses, but certainly foundations and around the philanthropic arm. It's around high net worth individuals as well. So I really just wanted to say that because it's such a cross-section that we're trying to pull together to then facilitate what we think a co-design process of the future of our urban food system would look like, and a circular model of that. So yeah, big answer for that, but that's essentially where we're heading now.
Yeah, it's a really big answer, but it shows the importance of food. We all have access to food, but then some of us don't, because you did mention food insecurity. So can you talk about what food insecurity means for us?
Yeah, sure. And I think you just touched on a great point as well, that food is this commonality. It's this common connector between all of us. In essence, it's this kind of lever that we can all access to be able to get behind a joint mission. Food insecurity, in my understanding, and through the organisations we work with, and an example that people might be able to connect with as well is Oz Harvest, and it's essentially an organisation which is looking after rescuing food and passing on that food to people who are in need of food, who don't have access to guaranteed and regular food sources, and which is it's a dire situation for society to be in that scenario. And so with us, we're trying to connect and see how we can pull these different stakeholders together to actually address some of those bigger societal issues.
So you're like the roundup kind of
the
person.
facilitator.
The facilitator. Thank you. For bringing everyone together and say, how can we do this a lot better and work collaboratively?
I think, we're trying to do that. And I think that's what I was trying to say, is that we're using that common connector of food and food waste as this means to actually create something of worth in a tangible solution. This, as I said before, this platform that can actually put some unique initiatives together to address it from a local scale, to be able to see if that can be used as a larger model elsewhere.
I really like the local scale that you're trying to implement, and then seeing how it works in other different areas.
Yeah.
Let's go back to food waste, because food waste is a massive issue. And I know that where I am in Lake Macquarie, we have a food organics, garden organics system, which is called FOGO. And that's just wonderful for us, because I'm not a key composter. I have never had success with composting, but we use our FOGO system on a weekly basis. Now, not every council has that, but can you talk a bit more about food waste?
Yeah, totally. Just one of the most vital bits of information is that I think it's in Australia we waste 7.6 billion tonnes of food, so things which is crazy. But also a more succinct or concise fact is that we waste 1/3 of all food produced, which is wild. It's just such a crazy scenario
isn't
to
it?
think about.
Yeah.
So essentially, food waste comes in all different forms as well. But I think it comes from people in apartments to hospitality, a major contributor to it as well. But it's all through different items of the value chain of just producing food in itself, from farming to logistics to food wastage from packaging and what is actually a perfect apple in the sense of the consumer's eyes. So through all different arms of the production or the consumption cycle of us as consumers, it's wasted. Yeah, there needs to be some other direction and some other little bit of aid on that process.
I really don't like buying things in plastic from the supermarket, and that has increased exponentially over the last number of years.
Mm.
But when I get to the supermarket and I find that packaged fresh produce is in a plastic bag, and because it's in a plastic bag, it has to have a use-by date on it. And then it gets to the use-by date and then they sell it off cheap. I end up buying it because it's this whole values thing going, well, I don't like it in plastic. However, I don't want that food to go to waste and I can do something with that and I can enjoy it.
Yeah. There's many different conversations around that. I feel it's so true. Like there's the odd bunch side of things for, different things from Woolies and Coles. And I think there's also, you can buy a gigantic bag of apples to be more, competitively priced, whereas because they're not, I did that myself recently because they were, the odd bunch side of things. It is it's a dilemma that we as the consumer have constructed, essentially. Like we are the ones who are saying yes or no to a perfect bit of produce. I think the larger organisations, the larger retailers and things that Coles and Woolies of society, they're certainly cluing onto it, but I think there's a long way to go. Yeah, being a bit more resourceful with our food from us as consumers, but to as the retailers and wherever we can is pretty key. It is great to see some of the innovations and the products which are coming out there, like normalising it a little bit more, which is pretty handy to see. But on that topic before about the packaging side of things, I did a bit of research recently, and the element that I focus on is that there were pre-packaging pieces of orange. You've literally taken the perfectly packaged product and then repackaged it, and it's just
that's crazy.
It's a fascinating scenario.
It's a bit like bananas, isn't it? And avocado, like bananas being in a plastic bag.
Yeah,
because they've got their own casing that's protecting their fruit already.
It's perfect. Yeah, it is wild. I think feedback exists to see if we can create some different platforms to get around that.
What's something surprising that you've learned about food waste?
I think originally it was surprising the amount we do. The volume is just crazy. I think it's surprising just the fact that there's so much of it, and I'm surprised that just I guess general councils and so on and their FOGO side of things. It's great to see Lake Mac is on that, and they have been for 5 or 6, 7 years. I'm not sure.
Yeah, something like that. It's been quite a long time.
Yeah, it is amazing. And it's just, I think there's still a long way to go with actually having the infrastructure to manage it around, Australia and the world. It's certainly going to be seen more as a resource soon enough, because it's absolutely an amazing resource. I have a very thriving worm farm here, and it offers my closed loop growing at home. So it's an amazing resource compared to buying a bunch of potting mix somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like how, because you've come from that farming background, you come from that food growing background. So having a worm farm for you is super easy and simple. And you currently live in an apartment, so that's a really great thing to do in a small space.
Yeah, it's just populating. It's great. It's never ending. It's so good. Chuck in the worm farm, then add that delightful castings with a few odd worms into your garden, which is kind of closed off as well. And so you feel like this is going to become so abundant. It's an entertaining mission. It has been since composting up at the farm in these 20-metre long windrows and getting your hand up to your shoulder into compost, and living in an apartment. It's a very different scenario.
Yeah, it is a very different scenario. So what is the connection between food waste and building stronger social ties within communities?
I think I was trying to say it before, is that common connector, or that commonality that everyone deals with food a couple of times a day. Invariably, they would have elements of food waste from that. And I think the connection that we're trying to foster is that, from my experience from running a couple of different farms in cities, and just realizing that platform is this amazing opportunity to connect us all, from having the individual story where we brought a couple of early childhood centres down to one location in particular, and it was the 4 or 5 year old little kiddies' first time harvesting carrots, but also the same day it was their managers who were there looking to supervise them as well, harvesting their first carrots as well. And I feel like that's a really great example to understand in our manner of feedback organic and creating farms. If we can create a connection from us as individuals to our food system through systems like that, I think we become more aware of the amazing resource that food is, and the opportunities that there are to utilize it in such a great way as well. And I think a really great example of what these urban farms have been for us is been really around being able to pilot different ideas and initiatives and things like that. And I think if we can foster more examples like that for other individuals to create innovations, because I think that's what people need to be able to test their ideas, especially around food systems. And I think that these models, or at least having a physical platform where people can come to and connect and understand about that, but really bringing those diverse stakeholders that I touched on before together. And I think our bigger mission coming up is we're expanding into Sydney at the moment. The next stage or next horizon that we're looking at is creating a digital platform, but then that actually then leads into creating a centre of excellence, which is a physical platform to really put the boots on the ground or hands in the soil of that kind of co-design process that we're looking to really kick off. And I think having those physical areas to do that is really key.
I like that story that you just told about the daycare centre or the preschool coming, and it was the educator's first time of pulling a carrot as well as the young child's first time.
More opportunities like that would be really great. I think it's so true. Like I know my life has changed from having feedback organically operate, and I think all of my friends have come out of that. And I feel like there's just so many different opportunities. For example, some of the scenarios that we're thinking of in the future with that centre of excellence is that you can, especially with that cross section of society that we're hoping to pull down, is that like pull to the locations, is that you could have a sustainable finance team coming on down to one of these farms harvesting. At the same time, there's also a community leader there who is interested in starting another urban ag project somewhere else. They talk about sustainable financing. Essentially, like this is this melting pot where these opportunities you would never get anywhere else. And I think that's actually what it's about. And as you said, around how or why is it important to do that and to foster those ideas?
Can you describe for us what an urban farm looks like?
Yeah, I wish I could share you my screen right now. It's my desktop wallpaper. I'll give you the footprint. It's about half the size of a soccer field. That's an acre, so not a gigantic area, but that had 70 20-metre long, 1 metre wide beds, agricultural beds, just kind of raised gardens, just that we would be tilling initially and then just letting the worms in the soil and the compost do their work. Yeah, it's a farm in a city that you're able to produce quite a number of kilos per week. We would say from 300 to 500 kilos of produce per week, obviously seasonally as well. And in our model, with it being a closed loop version of a food system, we were also processing 5 tons of food waste each week on these sites as well. And they were through a certain iteration of composting systems that we had worked out. So I think what it actually is and what it looks like is you've got this really great example of this kind of demonstrational model of a closed loop food system in a city. And the main amazing element of that is that people can get to it. It's an accessible site, which all of our cities people can get to. I think a big part of what we were trying to do is bring all of our cafes and restaurants and other organisations who we collect food waste from to those sites to absolutely understand where the food waste is going. And ideally, you're actually then providing the produce back to those outlets as well for them to use within their meals and their offerings. And yeah, it takes a lot of good support to make that happen.
And can you give us some examples of restaurants that might have, or cafes that might have been a part of this and then showed some kind of impact?
I think Estebar is a really great example. Estebar on Newcastle Beach, because they're such a popular cafe, and they're using such fresh ingredients that they're going through a couple of 100 kilos of food waste each week, but it's going somewhere sustainably for us, for example. And how that works with them, for example, on several occasions, we invited them out to the farm, all of their staff, the owner, Beck, who is now no longer the owner, has moved on. But from that, they would absolutely see a hands-on experience of quite literally taking one of their large 120-litre bins of food waste to the farm, seeing it go into the compost. They would then be a part of the harvest as well. For that day, they'd walk away with one of our feed boxes as well to really be an example of that closed loop. A big part of that and how to promote that to their customers as well is really around, having this kind of promotional information within their cafe to understand, so that the customers understand what they're a part of and, why they're doing it, and how their dishes that they're being served to the customers are, now incorporating these bits of this produce. So it's such a cool closed loop, and I think that's the living example of it. And more of that, please.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's really good to hear that whole systems approach, because you can go to any cafe and you can get any food, But it does make a big difference when you visit a cafe that has local produce and knows what to do with it and communicates that with customers. Yeah, I would love to see more of that as well.
Yeah, I think it's really great because there's the initiative that we have underway as well is kind of an outreach program to get people onto the farm called 1 Hour Farming, and that's you can come down at any time. But a big part of that is that it's being promoted at the cafe as well. So the more you're exposed to this, the more people will be coming down, and the more ultimately the ideas that come out of this is just other people thinking, oh, I could do that. And if you can replicate this model elsewhere, that's essentially what that centre of excellence that we're putting together is all about as well, trying to replicate the model.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think it's very timely.
Yeah. Sustainable Development Goals only a couple of years away now, need to be adhered to. And there's every inkling of motivation to make this happen more regularly. Very shortly, I think it was destined to be 2025, but I think it's been pushed back 1 year now to 2026. But there is a commercial food waste mandate coming in, and that's to make sure that all of our businesses and everyone actually legally has to do something about it. And from that, there will definitely be more opportunities, more investment getting behind this as well. The perseverance that you need to do these kind of things to get these ideas off the ground, I think is really important to actually add that successful business element to it. You need to be able to actually fund what you're doing, because I think you can do it so much by trying to just love what you're doing. But I think we live in the world where you actually need to sustain yourself financially. So I think I might have been running along those lines early on in Feedback Organics history, but I think it's really important to make sure that any ideas around food systems and community, trying to actually get funding to make them happen is really key.
How can businesses get involved in all of the good things that you're doing or your centre of excellence? What's the next step for them?
Well, just anyone. I think around Newcastle, there's a couple of different initiatives happening, which hopefully will be supported very recently from Environment Protection Authority grant from the EPA for different initiatives for local businesses and anyone who has an issue or has too much food waste. If they want to reach out to us, for sure, absolutely, and we can connect them with all sorts of different initiatives happening and popping up. I think if you are a business, absolutely reach out to us to actually have it sustainably managed, and know that there's now a non-profit focusing completely on circular food systems and the inclusivity of them as well within our society.
And just helping tread lighter on the planet, because let's face it, for businesses and cafes, there's waste removal that they can pay for and there's recycling that they can pay for, but there doesn't seem to be, like, you're really filling the gap for the food waste.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that the infrastructure for processing organics on a large scale is quite limited. One of the partners that we work with is Remondis, and they have a facility in Awabba, which is exactly the same location as where Lake Mac does theirs as well. However, they are separate on-site locations. So I think it comes down to the large capital expenditure which is required to set up these sites. But I think in the meantime, if we can come up with other smaller versions, like we were kicking off in Newcastle, try and support them as much as possible. But I think that's the thing, if you want to be able to try and scale your impact, you have to think about what methods are best to achieve that. I think for us, we were trying to rethink our version, heading to the non-profit and then heading to partnerships. Our mission statement is to create community inclusive circular food systems that scale. And I think that is such a big part of it, that we need to be inclusive. And I think it takes collaboration and cooperation to make it happen. So even podcasts like this is absolutely to get the idea out there.
What impact have you seen since starting Feedback Organic?
I could throw a whole number of stats out for sure.
Yeah, give it to us. This is really good.
I think you can start with some bigger numbers that in the essence of how we're converting food waste into food. The equivalent of 50,000 meals have been produced, which is pretty amazing. It's around 5 to 6 tons of food waste being diverted from landfill each week. So that's very much in the over 10 years. It's a gigantic number. I think from that, we've had around 5,000 volunteers come to the farms over the last couple of years as well. And there's been at least 25 different schools around different areas come along to these different farms as well. I think from that, you've also been kind of a catalyst for 5 or so different farmers around the area of the Hunter as well. People coming to see that. And that's, as I was saying before, to be able to replicate the model elsewhere, or just replicate, getting people exposed to this. And I think a story of that feedback farms. Matt and Lauren and James, you all started off as volunteers as through that 1 hour farming program. They're incredibly enthusiastic, and they're always a fantastic reference point for when we like to talk about this, because as they, after that, ended up becoming employees of Feedback and then ended up running one of the main farms in Newcastle, and ultimately then created their own farm from that. So I think that's a really great example of what this can provide access to. And I do remember when Matt and Lauren first started, I remember seeing their backyard and they had things growing everywhere. And I think that was where you could obviously see that this is incredibly passionate for them. And I think from that point on, having a larger area to test their ideas from as well, that was key. As Matt, Lauren and James were absolutely experimenting with a bit more of a diverse variety of crops, and also a bit more inclusive of insects as well. So it was a great updated version of what we were doing, other than just the kind of food waste into food. And yeah, a lot of diversity that's actually helped the crops overall. It's fantastic.
What's the future looking like for Feedback?
We'll have a new website coming out pretty soon with all of our updated approaches. And there's an amazing new board who's behind who is helping to put together what we're doing right now. And we'll be launching an EPA, hopefully an EPA Business Food-Based Partnerships grant, which is focusing on large corporates actually around Sydney. And that's just something which is, coming very soon. I think I might as well do a small plug. I did a TED Talk recently, which is hopefully will be released relatively soon, and I'll try and share that as much as possible so we can get the ideas out there to get this idea just flourishing a bit more.
Yes, because that was a TEDx talk in Newcastle.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was amazing to see the other guests who were having a chat, and just such just an incredible diverse amount of people, and what we're talking about. But we were able to talk about very crazy facts around food waste, and then just what are the methods that we think are the way forward. And we ended up using a really age-old example of the Betty Crocker cake mix, of how if basically there was an issue, when Betty Crocker launched their first pre-mixed cake mix, basically all you needed to do as a consumer was to add water, and that was it to the cake mix itself. And you thought it was going to be an amazing success, and ultimately it wasn't. It flopped at that point, and they kind of wondered why that was. And as consumers, it was because we thought it was too easy, and we wanted to be involved in the actual process. So I'm saying this because the addition of the consumer cracking an egg ended up ensuring that sales just went to an extreme. But I'm saying that because when we are, as a consumer, involved in some type of preparation or a part of our food prep and things like that, if you can actually engage people in a similar effect known as the IKEA effect, which is a similar one I referenced as well, there's actually stats all around when we as consumers are involved in for example, prefabricated, actually putting your drawer or your table together itself instead of just buying it made. It absolutely builds our connection to that product or service. And I think that's where we're trying to do that with Feedback as well. We're trying to immerse people within this absolute, this food system. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting little thing to add. You might even think the last time that you've put something together in a bit of furniture, or if you've made it yourself, there's obviously so much more to it. And it's the same as a food system.
Yeah, I love those analogies. Thank you so much for sharing that.
It seems such like a smaller issue within every household, and possibly on the household side. But when it comes to commercially, it is just such a gigantic contribution volume-wise to landfill. So I think, just reinforcing that and making sure that we can actually get as many people or many organisations to be aware and actually contributing in a positive way to it would be great.
Yeah, thank you. That is really sage advice. Just to put in another another food-based pun for you.
Let's not get carried away, Marty. There it is.
Yeah, that's really good. I really like that circularity of everything that you do, and I like how Feedback Organic has grown to meet the needs of the community and what's happening with our people and in our urban environment.
It's an exciting journey.
It is very exciting. Thanks, David, for your time. It's been a really insightful conversation.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the ReNewy Living Podcast. I hope you're feeling more confident about taking a localised and actionable approach to living sustainably. If this episode has inspired you to take simple action, please follow the ReNewy Living podcast so you can catch every episode. We'd love it if you could share this episode with your friends. It's a great way to spread the word and help more people join the conversation about living sustainably. You can even send me an email with the episode that really made it for you. Hearing your positive actions for change helps me understand how these stories work within our shared communities. Head over to my website, renewyliving.com.au, for the show notes and blog posts from this episode. I look forward to sharing more stories from the people of Newcastle as we delve into our community's diverse social and environmental practices for positive planetary change from a localised perspective.